Hey everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I am Pat Reinhart, and today I am joined by one of my favorite human beings on the planet and in the industry, Martha Van Berkel. Martha, how you doing today?
I'm doing rockin'. Can't wait to be here.
All right, there we go. And today we are talking about schema markup and AI search. Of course, you came to a webinar and we were going to talk about AI search, but today we are talking about entities. So the title, Schema Markup and AI Search, from entities to results. But before we get into that, who are we? So you know who you're talking to. Hi, everyone. My name is Pat Reinhart. I lead professional services and thought leadership here at Conductor. I've been in the SEO industry forever. Don't let the Mohawk fool you. And I am a jaded Jets fan. If you watch American football, I hope you root for any other team other than the New York Jets. But enough on me. Let's pass it over to Martha.
Sure. I'm Martha Van Berkel. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Schema App, and this is my knowledge graph. So this is me and the entities. We're going to kind of delve right into kind of the entity topic. A little bit about me. I have a technical background. I went to MIT in Queens, not Queens, New York, but Queens in Canada. I am Canadian, and I actually grew up in enterprise. I spent 14 years in California working at Cisco, and I know a thing or two about schema markup. And a fun fact about me is I used to drive a 1965 Austin Healey Sprite. This is actually a picture of my car. And my car was in the movie called Losing Chase that Kevin Bacon directed. And so Kevin Bacon used to drive my car. And I always share this because I love how defining and connecting the entities allows you to do accurate inferencing. You are correct. You can now win the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon game. But enough about entities. Let's actually jump right in. We're going to start a little bit by just talking about what the market is looking like right now and how things have changed because it's changing quick. And a couple kind of key events that happened over the spring. In May, both Google and Microsoft stood up on stage and started reiterating the importance of structured data. And a lot of their documentation got updated to say, do structured data in order to show up in our AI experiences. Now, they weren't alone. OpenAI also updated their documentation to say that they would be using schema markup for product listings. This came out in June. Now, the reason I highlight these is it was a big change. Again, we live and breathe in the schema markup world. The last time Google really got excited and started talking about schema markup was in November 2023. So it's been a minute. Now, the reason why I mention Google and Microsoft and ChatGPT is because as we think about optimizing and our new roles of optimizing for search and visibility across not just, traditional search, but AI platforms, these are the major players, right? So if you're optimizing for Google, for Microsoft and ChatGPT, you're hitting like the biggest amount of search share as well as sort of that AI platform's chatbot share. Now, the other piece is like, that's great, Martha. Like, lots of things can be put into documentation, but does it actually matter? And we're going to talk a lot about measurement today. So just think of this as sort of like some research, and then Pat's going to show us some great ways that Conductor help us measure this. Is that like through this one research that AISO did, is that they did look at, I love this, accuracy, completeness, and quality of answers in ChatGPT when there was schema markup on the page and when there was not. And it was, outstanding results that, again, the accuracy, completeness, and quality of the answers was better when schema markup was present. So, the question here is sort of why. But before we get there, we're going to go back to Pat. And Pat, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in the market changes and sort of what's really relevant, again, on this topic of AI and entities.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when you look at how AI is functioning right now, what they're looking for is like trusted or partnered sources, right? So when you think about how a traditional search engine works, right? Like what has Google been trying to do over the last 30 or so years, right? They've been trying to match the intent behind a user's query and match it semantically to a piece of content within their index, right? And that's happening, at a big pace. But at the same time, when you look at an LLM or a large language model, they work a little bit differently, right? Because they live in what's called a 3D vector embedding space, right? So they're in a 3D world, whereas they're not just going out, retrieving, going back to an index and pulling it back, right? They're actually listening all over the internet, right? Like if you think of like an LLM, like floating in the ocean, right? And it is listening for hums all around the ocean. Like, hey, someone might be talking about you on Reddit. Someone might be watching a video about you on YouTube. They might be reading an article on your website. They might be watching something on TikTok, whatever that is. I'm old. And, ultimately, what you have to think about is it's not about like link authority, which is, I get a lot of questions around this, like, what about linking in this new world? It's not really about link authority, right? It's about brand authority. And how do you build up your brand authority? You build up your entities within your website and within your organization. Now, an entity can be many things, and so this is what I call my honeycomb slide. Like an entity can be many things. Like if you think about Conductor as an entity represented by the green honeycombs, right? And we're connected to a lot of other entities, right? Like I think about SMX Advanced, where I just spoke, right, which could be represented by the blue. And then I'm actually going to speak at Brighton SEO, in September. I believe Martha will be there as well.
I'll be there too. Yeah.
There you go. So come see both of us. We'll high five you. Which is represented by purple here. And when you think about that, those are all entities within our, kind of our world, right? And not only do I speak at these organizations, but my CEO speaks, right? And Conductor as a product, is spoken about, and other products like Schema app are spoken about, right? And all of these things, people, they are all entities. And as more people talk about you on Reddit, more people watch videos, or you create videos on YouTube, and more articles are written, right? The LLM is floating in the middle of that, and it's hearing all of these little hums from around the internet saying like, oh, well, Conductor and Schema app, like people use them, people talk about them. They're experts within those companies are speaking at these events that are associated with all these other experts that are that speak at these events that are associated with all these other companies that are experts within this industry. And that's where you can really take it and say, like when you use something like Schema Markup to build up the entities on your site, whether that's a product, whether that's a person, et cetera, that's how you give LLMs kind of the nod, right? Like, hey, that we're an expert in this space. And it's not just happening on our .com, it's happening all over the internet. We're being spoken about all across the internet. So that's my take on it, Martha. So, passing it back to you, feel your feedback on that.
So I love the honeycombs because it's really sort of like talking about the relationships, and the relationships are really key. And I'll just go back to my intro slide. Like it's the defined relationships, which by the way, I'm using Schema Markup to define here, that allow you to accurately infer you can win the Kevin Bacon game, right? So this is the same thing large language models are doing when they understand the relationships, amongst the entities in your site. So Pat, I loved how you were talking at like the macro level. There's these giant blobs of information and entities, right? Like you're being mentioned in the Reddits, like in the New York Times, right? But actually brands and specifically enterprises, like the control point in this world where there's like not a lot of measurement, or like it's hard to measure, there's a lot of unknowns about what's changing. The control point for brands to describe those entities and to kind of, I talk about like have the input in the machine to make sure it's getting, again, accurate, complete, and high quality answers, which is like what we want when people are looking for a brand, is actually doing that Schema Markup and connecting those dots and defining those relationships with accuracy. Now, you've seen my intro slides. So let me give you like another example. Pretend you're a bank, right? So, and I'm a consumer. I was sharing with Pat before we started. I'm a little over caffeinated today. I really like myself an iced oat latte. And, what if I wanted a credit card where I could get Starbucks points, right? Or some type of benefit to basically help my caffeine addiction, right? So again, we know that our prompts are really personalized, right? We're actually putting in things like, I'm a Starbucks drinker. I loved my oat milk latte. I'm looking to get a new credit card, but I'd like it to help me save money with regards to my coffee purchases. I bank with these three large banks. Could you help me find a credit card that would like help me save money? Right? Like this might be an actual prompt I put in. And what I love about sort of the ability as we sort of, ask these questions is if you were a bank and you had a page that described your credit cards where you talk about, the cost of the credit card, what the offer is. Again, so this one actually gives me 3% cash back on my category of choice. Good news. I'm going to pick, my consumer goods or my caffeine, if that's an option, maybe food services companies. It ties it to which bank it is. So I've given it the banks that I bank with. And then, it also knows that it's a Visa card. It knew I was looking for a credit card. So it can infer that that's a type of credit card. So now all of a sudden, the large language model can actually, with all that listening hums, use the schema markup as those indicators to help it accurately answer that piece. And I love this as an example because it really kind of again tells us what we can control in this new world. And it really is those semantics, those relationships that are true. And the semantics is like that theme that's really coming back. So Pat, I'm going to pass it back to you because I know you've been kind of talking about the semantics and intent. So kind of tie that back to like what's consumer behavior, how that's changing and why, like how this all connects together.
Yeah, and when you think about it, when you really have to think about the anatomy of a prompt, right, versus the anatomy of a query, right? Because prompts are so much more hyper personalized, and there's so much more intent, and so just generally more information in them, right? When you look at a Google traditional search, right, the average length is 3 to 4 words. Right. So if I was buying something like this office chair, which is very squeaky, as we determined at the beginning of this webinar, so I'm going to probably buy a new one. It's like what would I put in? I'd put in something like comfortable ergonomic office chair, right? Like that's something that I would put in. Now, if you go to ChatGPT, using them as an example, the average length of a prompt in ChatGPT is 23 words, right? So what would I say? I would say I'm a 43-year-old man with lower back pain, and I'm looking for a comfortable ergonomic office chair that I can pick up in store, right? Like let's just say that that's something that I put, right? Now, what does that create? It creates a lot. There's a lot going on in that prompt, which means that when you think about intent stages versus personas, traditionally, what are the intent stages that we've all been kind of using all these years? It's informational, it's educational, it's commercial. Those are typically the ones that we're talking about, right? But when you think about how AI search worked, what was I asking in that prompt, right? I was asking to be educated. I said I wanted to pick it up in store. I was probably looking to purchase. I was looking for, potentially some support on it. And then ultimately, when you look at the number of personas that aligns with all of these now, multiples of intent stages, the number of prompts iterations that happen are infinite. So like when someone asks me, "Hey Pat, like what's the monthly search volume of a prompt?" The answer is probably one. It's probably one because it's so hyper personalized and there's so many different iterations. And that's why you have to start thinking, hey, it's not necessarily all about ranking, and it's really not. Like rankings are directional. It's more about, what is my overall market share in a topic, topic cluster, right? And that's what we've built at Conductor, and I'll show you that in a minute of how you could you can track that. But when you think about entities, like the way that like the LLM is going to go out and find the answers to all of those very specific questions is, like schema markup can help enhance that. And that's how you kind of make yourself louder, from that perspective, right? It's how you magnify your voice across, because if someone's looking for all these different things, LLMs, they can execute JavaScript, they can watch videos or listen to videos, they can, they understand what images look like, but all of that stuff is inefficient for them. It costs them more money. It costs them more compute to do that. So if you have a rich set of data like schema markup, metadata, all that in the back end, and an LLM comes in, they say, oh, this is a great answer to this question. And this site has all of this schema markup structured, and I can answer all these different iterations of these questions quickly. You want to know what's going to happen? LLMs are going to come back to your site more often, and they're going to retrieve your content more often, chunk it out, and put it back into the answer to the user. And that's really what you're trying to create here. Again, when you build up these entities around your products and your people, that's how and you give LLMs easy access to that data where they can just come in, get the raw data, and get out, and it's cost effective for them to come in. Like that is a very powerful thing for your brand. I don't know, Martha, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you just like hit the nail on the head as to like why we're seeing, I would say like the at scale large language models asking for structured data, right? Like while we may see some, I would say perplexity is like a laggard in it, it's because it like the scale at which the number of prompts and the uniqueness of the prompts, it's really costly, right, for them to do this at that scale. So I think there's a ton of research that shows how large language models with knowledge graphs, and I use a knowledge graph because like when you do proper connected entities,
Mm-hmm.
you're actually building that data layer that's a knowledge graph, that actually makes large language models more accurate. And I think there was a really great question that kind of ties to what I'm about to talk about, which is like, what should you optimize? Like, and it's kind of this thinking of what entities are important for the business. this, right? So again, like if you think of, I loved your kind of dissecting the prompt kind of way of thinking, Pat, because if you dissect the questions your customers are asking, what are those like kind of big things? What are the nouns, right? Like let's go back
Yep.
to, grade 4 or fourth grade, English, right? Like they're talking about products, they're talking about people, they're talking about places, right? Those you can think of those as like the big entities, right? Those are like the big topics. And I often like interchange entities and topics because I think topics is often easier to understand. And so part of that first step when you're thinking about your schema markup, historically, you think about which rich results can I get, right? Which ones, can I get the stars and price for products? Can I get an FAQ? Now you need to think about entities. So this is that shift, not just from keywords to entities, but also from, rich results to entities. Like you're really thinking about like, what are the things that I need to be found? And then you're going to connect them. So this is about someone is asking about same as. Same as is like one way that you can clarify or disambiguate an entity. But you want to also kind of define relationships. So if you take anything away from today, it's like not just defining entities. So it's like this is the page that I'm talking primarily about this product. And this is how this product relates to the organization. So maybe I'm talking about Conductor's new AI offering, and I'm talking about how that's offered by Conductor. And if I want to, contact their professional services, like here's like the professional services team and the services they offer. You want to like connect those because it's that context. Again, think of that Kevin Bacon example. That's where the power comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a one-time thing because again, there's some research I just even read this week where it was, like the LLMs are loving sort of real up-to-date type of content. And so, the way I took away from it is like the importance of doing the content suggestions you're going to get from Conductor or the, updating and sort of like making sure you have rich new content that's relevant to again what your consumers looking like. So you need to manage those entities as they evolve. So again, this isn't just a tactic. This is like an ongoing kind of optimization strategy. Call it GEO or SEO, whatever you want to call it. But like this is that new world of sort of like how you're thinking about it. And just to give you an example, before we get into metrics about how you kind of show the ROI is, think of like I think of internal and external entity linking. So here is an example. Now it's always in context of the page. So if this page is a PDP or a product detail page, like the primary page is talking about a product, and I'm just having a property that's saying it's about this handsaw and this is the same as. And the same as is helping kind of reference to other places where handsaw is defined. Here it's Wikidata, Wikipedia, Knowledge Graphic could be other data sources depending on if you have your own glossary, you might be pointing there. And then internal entity linking is where you're connecting the dots within the organization. So the example I used previously with Conductor, it might be sort of this is their AI offering page, like their new capability that you can get. And this is, I'm tying it back to Conductor as a company, as an organization. And so that would be like internal entity linking. And internal entity linking is really powerful. It's more complicated to do and manage.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually what we specialize at Schema App on. But it's really powerful because you can imagine if you're writing blogs and mentioning people or products or industries, right? If those are things again within your organization, you want to give context of those relationships. And it was interesting you talked about sort of the world of backlinking, right? Like we used to live in this world. Think of also this evolution of going from like, we're interlinking and backlinking to now providing context between entities, right? Like that's sort of like the new backlinking, like the new linking kind of world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of, again, how you can execute and sort of think about how you're preparing your data, for this kind of new world. Now, the last topic we wanted to touch on is both Conductor and Schema App have ways of sort of like, how do we measure this? Like, how do we know we're making progress? What does it look like sort of measuring how we're making progress? So Pat, back to you. Can you share a little bit about what you're doing at Conductor? And then I'll share a little bit about what we're doing at Schema App.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, kind of going back to what I was talking about before, like rankings versus like a topic cluster, right? Like in your market share within a particular topic cluster. Traditional search, again, it was like phrase match, broad match, exact match, keywords, that everyone, hey, I want to rank for this set of keywords. And now when you look at AI search, again, in that 3D space, looking all around for all these different answers and all this different context and all this different meaning and trying to match that meaning, back to what someone has prompted it. You have to start thinking about the telemetry of all of it, right? And it's not like a lot of traditional like organic metrics are going to become directional here, or already are directional. Monthly search volume still important, but directional. Rankings, directional, still important. Organic traffic, you probably shouldn't goal yourself on organic traffic anymore, but you certainly should. You certainly should continue to monitor it. We actually will very soon be able to show you your AI referral traffic next to your traditional organic traffic, because again, everyone, we're going to live in this two-channel world for a while. Traditional search is not like turning off tomorrow. We're going to live in this hybrid period for a lot longer than I think people think. And also, you have to think about, again, like how a crawler is actually accessing your site. But speaking on what I believe is probably the most important right now, which is the topics, right? Like the actual the actual like topics that you have to figure out, like what cluster and am I in? What clusters do I want to be in or own? And what is my market share for each, right? So what you're looking at here is our AI topic maps feature, which is releasing very soon. And what we're doing here is we are ingesting all of the content that is on your site, and then we are emulating how an LLM would look at it and clustering all of your content. And then based on things like MSV and traffic, traditional search metrics, which are great proxies for demand about that particular topic, we are then showing you based on that where your opportunities lie. So not only can we show you what those topics are, if you actually double click down into it, we'll show you where your opportunities are, whether that is a piece of content. So each dot represents a piece of content. So whether that content either is missing something, which is what is represented by the red dot. Blue dot means you got good coverage and you're getting traffic, and there's demand there. And then you'll see this little plus sign, which means there's a question that someone is asking, or a particular topic or subtopic within that larger topic that you are not addressing on your site. And then we'll just give you the recommendation right next to it. And this to me, this takes the mystery out of it. You know what I mean? Like, this really does take the mystery out of it, which I think is what a lot of people are struggling with right now. Is like, what do I do? And from that perspective, it really comes in, and I cannot advance the slides, which
I can
is
try.
weird. Can
There
you
you
try?
go.
Oh, well, I cannot see the slides changing on my screen. That's weird. So I'm assuming that now you are
You're
seeing
on the
the
next
third.
slide. Yes.
You are seeing the next slide. Which is and again, like when you look at these different recommendations, it's really that's really the point of it. There we go. You can really see like what the recommendation is, and that again, it's meant to take the mystery out of it, because now we all have to start thinking about what are the new metrics that we're going to goal ourselves on. And I get this question like 30 times a week, right? I was just on a call with a large retailer, and like the first question was, how should I, what should I measure against? Like, what should I measure against? And again, I think personas are going to become infinitely more important than they have been. Not that they haven't always been important, but I think since they've taken so much time to put together, the advent of AI is going to make personas so much easier to update and more accessible to a lot of people with smaller teams and smaller budgets and just smaller bandwidth. And also, I think that's going to help them understand, what audiences am I really looking for, right? So that's one thing. Like, what are the true audience and the personas that you're going after, right? Then it comes down to the topical authority, and which is your market share in topic cluster in a particular topic cluster. And I think that's the new ranking, right? Like, instead of listen, again, understanding where you rank and understanding how much market share you own in the particular topic cluster in AI is a very high correlation to ranking well and doing well in AI search, being cited and mentioned in AI. So we have to recognize that we have to serve both masters here for the time being, and that leads to the next piece, which is some of the new metrics: brand mentions and brand sentiment, and citation frequency and citation ownership. This is going to be how you understand, and what the two charts on top is what that is in the image of how you are growing your visibility over time and how that relates to your overall market share. And then ultimately, from like a traffic standpoint, AI crawler traffic, and I do not mean like referral traffic. That's actually separate from this. What I mean is server log file analysis is going to have a moment here, right? Typically only done
Imagine.
by, I know, right? I can't believe it. Typically only done by technical SEO people. But this is going to be something that everyone has to learn how to do, which is basically you have to see how LLMs are accessing your site and retrieving your content, how often, and if there are parts of your site that are not being not being pinged and not being visited often, that means that LLMs are not retrieving them there, right? And then of course AI search referral traffic, how much is coming from ChatGPT, et cetera. Organic traffic is still a good proxy. You have to keep paying attention to that. And then of course conversion is master, and really focused
I
on
agree.
qualified traffic that is converting. Martha, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think conversion is king. So that's like a key piece. I think we also have to think of like one of our consumers is now machines, right? So
Yep. Yep.
like the question of like how are they understanding data? And we've partnered with Conductor with some of our enterprise clients, and we are seeing like absolutely when you manage the entities and topics well in your data and you kind of disambiguate them, like we are seeing great reports in Conductor showing AIO citations increase, seeing those topic clusters like become stronger. And one of the things that we look at, again, we're sort of nerds in the schema markup space doing it at scale, is how do you also understand what entities are in your content and how those entities are performing? So again, sort of we always think about like how do you control the data you're putting in? So I love how Conductor complements us beautifully looking at how is it performing and what's that looking like. We're trying to report on how the entities are showing up in your content, where there's gaps, and then how do we start looking at the metrics available today? So Entity Hub's a new product we just launched, and it gives you that visibility to manage entities at scale, curate them, and then also start looking at, I'll say, existing metrics, and these are going to
Mhm.
evolve as we get metrics from ChatGPT and others on like how are those actual entities performing, so that SEO and content can kind of work hand in hand. And I think that's where, again, both of us are kind of thinking is that like it really is about the data.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's like, and everyone should feel like very empowered right now, right? Like data is at the center of AI. We're all nerds. We've been living in data. I mean, like the last 23 years, I've been swimming in data like Scrooge McDuck in his money bin. Like that is like, we know how to do this, and we are the best people to lead through this new, again, SEO, AEO, whatever, like dealer's
Whatever.
choice, the acronyms, the acronyms are dealer's choice. I don't get into that, but I think we should all feel very empowered at the amazing opportunity that is in front of us. I always say this and joke that like I've had a million meteors come from my job over the last 23 years. Not one of them has fully landed and taken me out, but it always reshaped the landscape around me and led to a new path for my role to be a larger part of the organization. And that is truly how I feel about the opportunity that is in front of us here. And Martha, I don't know how you feel about it, but that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, I think SEOs are perfectly, set to have that growth mindset. We know things are constantly going to change. And frankly, like again, if you're thinking about schema markup, like you control that data layer, like that bottom line of what Pat's looking at, like that's the input that you're putting into the machines. And then the content teams are also doing it. So I just think like we're beautifully set up as an industry to really capture this new opportunity.
Absolutely, and everyone, Martha, I cannot believe it. We did not end early. Typically Martha and I are
We
very
talk
jazzed up,
fast.
and we talk really fast, and so that's why I was like, oh, we'll have questions at the end. But we actually did the full 30 minutes, which is shocking. But if you did enjoy this, everyone, thank you so much for your time and attention, spending 30 minutes of your valuable time with us. If you like my rantings and jokes, please register for my monthly webinar 3030. I see a lot of people here who come often. I thank you for that, but would love to see new faces there. And of course, Martha, if you want to take it off with Schema app.
Sure. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And then if you want to know more, we have a ton of content about entities. We've been writing about them a lot. So if you want to learn more best practices, check us out at schemaapp.com.
All right, everybody, thank you again so much, and we will see you next time.
Thanks.